Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my top books of 2018. So I actually read a lot of really incredible books this year. I had a really hard time narrowing it down, but I have 12 books that I would consider some of my favorites or some of the best that I have read this year. Also, I have no idea what order these end of the year videos are going up in, so in case I haven't said it yet, I recently got a new camera, so please bear with me as I figure out the sound and the angle and just I'm working on it. I'm doing what I can. It feels kind of silly to rank them because these are all fantastic books, but I did attempt to put them into some kind of reasonable order, although you'll see when we get to the last few, they're basically like a 4 or 5 way tie, so I did what I could. Number 12 on the list is The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. This is a really hard-hitting contemporary novel that deals with sexual assault, so there's a huge trigger warning for that. But there's this one girl in a small town who was raped, and because the perpetrator was, I think, the son of the police chief, nobody believes her, or nobody, they kind of decide not to believe her, and she gets run out of town. So we follow our 3 main characters as they find out what happened to this girl and how it's not only is it devastating for her, but it's also indicative of a larger problem with sexism and misogyny in this town. And our 3 main characters decide that they're going to do something about that, and they actually form kind of this movement or this group that is attempting to fight back against this misogyny and against rape culture in general. I also read Moxie by Jennifer Matthew this year, and I did love that one, but I think this one is more intersectional in its feminism. Just in our 3 main characters, we have a main character who is on the autism spectrum, one who is plus size, and one who is Latinx and a lesbian. So we definitely have a lot more diversity in this novel, and I think that this is just a really hard-hitting and powerful book. When I talked about it in a wrap-up, there are a couple of things I think the book could have done better, but I think overall it was really fantastic, incredibly powerful, and the female friendships in this book are just really, really hard-hitting, and the way that girls kind of come together and unite against this despicable behavior is just really amazing. And I think that even though it does deal with such a heavy topic, you are left with the feeling that there are things we can do to fight back, and I think that's important as well. Number 11 is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I only read this book this year. It's a classic or modern classic. It's a dystopian, and there's a lot it says about censorship and the power of written language as opposed to things like television or that was what Ray Bradbury was really fighting back against when he wrote this book, was not so much like censorship and book burning, but he was saying that TV was awful and books are better. So I know that's like a very common misconception. Either way, it's a fantastic book with a lot to dissect, and if it's at all possible, I would recommend going into this book knowing nothing about what it's about. You've probably heard that it's about firemen who in the future actually set fires. And that's really all I want to say about it, because that's really all I knew about it. And I think it was really incredible to go into this famous novel having no idea what was going to happen. The ending blew me away. There were so many lines that really affected me. Like, this book definitely brought me to tears a couple of times. And I just think it's such a powerful story about the resilience of humanity and the power of thought and the fact that storytelling matters. There's so many things that this book did really well, and the only reason it's lower down on this list is because I think no one's really surprised that this is a great book. Number 10 on the list is one you have heard me talk about a couple of times recently, and that is Witchwood by Tahereh Mafi. This is the companion sequel to Furthermore, and it is beautiful. It's just it's this gorgeously written fantasy, and I actually talked about Tahereh Mafi's writing in this series in a recent 4 different writing styles I love video, which I will link down below, but I was blown away by how much I adored this book. I did really enjoy Furthermore, but I was still surprised at how much Witchwood really got to me and how much I got invested in Layli, our main character. She is a Mortishwar, which means that her responsibility is to care for and prepare the bodies of the dead, but her village doesn't respect her for this. It's supposed to be a very honorable position, and they have just not treated her well. They don't respect what she does. She's an outcast in this town, and we follow a few main characters from Furthermore who decide that they're going to help Layli, and this kind of follows their quest to do that and trying to get Layli to accept help and affection from people, because she's definitely grown up in a really bleak and kind of emotionally distant way. So she has understandably not really used to asking people for help and not used to connecting to people in really meaningful ways. And the characters in this are fantastic. My heart broke for Layli so many times in this book, but the world building was also fantastic, and I never felt like the lush and beautifully described setting overpowered the characters or overpowered the story. I just think everything about this book was done so well. This book also draws on Persian folklore, which is something I haven't seen a lot of, and this is just so fantastic. Also, this book is a lot creepier than I thought it was. I haven't heard anyone mention it as it being like kind of a spooky atmospheric book, but it definitely is. Next, I have a nonfiction book, and that is Princesses Behaving Badly by Linda Rodriguez McRobbie, and the full subtitle is Real Stories from History Without the Fairy Tale Endings. So this is pretty much what it sounds like. It's talking about real women from history and kind of taking off the sugarcoating. Now, some of these women are ones that are very famous, but we don't get the full story on. Some of them are kind of misunderstood or misrepresented. You know, they were actually better people or more talented people than we thought they were. And some of these women, the author is straight up like, this was a terrible person. Like, she was not a good person, but she was important and we should learn about her. And if she were a man, we probably would have learned about her. Like, she definitely had an effect on the culture or the country where she lived. So I think this book does a really great job of balancing that, you know, of giving credit where it's due in that we are learning about these important and interesting women without making it sound like we admire what they did in every circumstance. I think if you're not used to reading nonfiction, this would be a great place to start because the writing is very engaging. It's humorous at times or clever or witty without being kind of overly cutesy or anything, and there's a huge variety of women covered from a wide variety of backgrounds and cultures, and I just think overall this was really well put together. Next, I have one that probably is not surprising if you have been on BookTube at all this year, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Now, this was an interesting experience for me because this is one of those books where I had several massive problems with it, but I still ended up loving it and giving it 5 stars. Like, I didn't like Jude, the main character, very much. I didn't care for the like going back and forth between fairy and our world. There was just like the political intrigue also took a while to get started, but like there were so many issues I had with this book that should have dragged my rating down. But at the end of the day, like, I freaking loved this. Like, there were so many things about it that worked for me that I could overlook even like glaring problems based on my reading taste. I do have a full review for this one, which I will link down below. There's a spoiler-free section and a spoilery section, but I loved this. I'm so excited for The Wicked King. I did really like the way the Fae are done. I think that's something that Holly Black always excels at. I did like some of the characters, even the ones I hated. They were like good characters and I was glad they were there, except for Taryn. Taryn has no purpose, and I do not support her being in this book at all. Also, I'm sure she's gonna be in The Wicked King and I'm like pissed off about it, but it's fine. Other than Taryn, I really enjoyed a lot of the characters and what they brought to the story. And I don't know, this is one of those books where like, why did I like this so much? I don't know. I can't justify it even to myself, but it's great. And it's number 8 on this list, so. Number 7 on this list is a really weird one, and that is Sunshine by Robin McKinley. This was actually the first Robin McKinley book I read, and it's super bizarre. Like, it's really weird. It's sort of dystopian or post-apocalyptic. It's like a paranormal romance, but not really a romance. Like, there's vampires in it and there's other creatures, but like that's not really the point. Like, there's way more about baking and this adorable little bakery that the main character works in than there is about like the actual creatures. It's just basically like if there was a huge disaster and now we have all these supernatural beings, and like ordinary people still have to get on with their lives and like go to work and like hang out with friends and everything. And it's so weird. I don't recommend this to everybody, but I think if you like weird genre blends or like kind of unlikable but really endearing main characters, like I love the characters in this book. I think that was another thing that helped me buy into the bizarre just weirdness of this world, was I did really like Sunshine, our main character. It's a nickname, by the way. And I really liked Constantine, who's the main like vampire character. There are specific scenes in this book that are just so like visceral and they really stand out to me. I read this book like months ago and I still like think about those scenes and these characters. I'm having a hard time coming up with what this book is about and what about it worked for me in particular, but I think it's fantastic. And I also really like the opening paragraph. I think it like sets up the tone of the book really well, and it's only a couple sentences. It was a dumb thing to do, but it wasn't that dumb. There hadn't been any trouble out at the lake in years, and it was so exquisitely far from the rest of my life. Number 6 on my list is another one I actually have a full non-spoiler review on, and that is Tess of the Road by Rachel Hartman. Oh, this book, it's so emotional and beautiful, and I do think you should read Seraphina before you read this one. You might be able to get away with not reading the sequel to Seraphina, but I think you do need some kind of understanding of this world to really appreciate what is going on in this book. But oh my god, I love Tess so much. She's really dealing with a lot, but seeing her grow and seeing her learn about herself and learn to accept that some terrible things that happen to her are not her fault. It's just, like, this book handles like really heavy topics like racism and sexism. Like, there's so many important things that this book handles, and it's also a really beautiful coming of age or like journey story. And you guys know I hate road trip books. Like, I really hate them. And this is basically like a road trip book, and I freaking loved it. I loved all of the characters. This is also a super diverse book. Like, the whole fantasy world that Rachel Hartman creates in this book and in the Seraphina duology is incredibly diverse in terms of race and gender and sexuality and species, and like there's so much going on, and it's so beautifully done. And her writing is incredible. I think she's one of my favorite authors because she just has this gorgeous style that is also descriptive without overloading you, and she's also really great at dialogue too. Like, there's like no part of her writing that I think is like subpar compared to the rest of it. I think she excels at like everything that she writes, every scene, and this book is so fantastic, and I'm gushing a little. I think as we get closer to the top of this list, I'm just gonna like dissolve more and more into a puddle of feelings because it's really hard to describe things that have a huge impact on you. One of the highest praises I can give this book is that I loved it so much that I wanted to stop reading it. And by that, I mean there's this one scene in particular in this novel that takes place in a cave, like in this kind of underground ice cavern almost. And it was so beautiful and moving and indescribable that after I finished that scene or that chapter, I closed the book and I went to bed, even though I could have stayed up longer to read this, because I wanted that to be like the last image in my head before I went to sleep. Like, that is how much of an impact this book had on me. Number 5 on my list is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. Oh man, shout out to Jocelyn from Yogi with the Book for convincing me to pick this up, because this was brilliant. I've discovered recently that desert fantasy is one of my favorite things, and this is beautifully done. I really recommend going into this one not knowing too much about the actual story. I think it kind of is inspired by the Mughal Empire, I believe, and there is a marriage of convenience trope, and there is just such a fantastic main female character, and her love interest, like, their relationship is just so good. All of their interactions are so sweet and wonderful. This book also gets like super dark, by the way. There's like murder and political like manipulations and intrigue, and like there are some serious consequences for the darkness of the world that these characters live in, so that's definitely not brushed over. Like, this is fantastic and I loved it, and like I want more people to read it, but I don't know how to make that happen when I can't even string a sentence together about why I love this book. But maybe like someday I'll do like a full review on it, I don't know, but I have a lot of feelings about it, and the like writing and the world and everything are just so fantastic. This is like kind of a slow building fantasy book, so I can see why it maybe wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea based on that aspect, but I loved it, and I don't feel like it ever, like, it didn't drag. It didn't feel boring, because even when there wasn't a lot of plot stuff happening, there was stuff in the story that was still happening, you know, like we were seeing character development, or like we were learning more about the world. Like, that was another thing I was really impressed by, was that we really got to understand this complex like web of different political factions and different like ethnicities in this world. We really understood them at the exact moment that we needed to. Like, there was no info dump, and there was no like, there were no places where I was like, I'm too confused to enjoy reading this book. It was like I trusted Tasha Suri to tell me what I needed to know once I got there, and she did. Please read it. It's amazing. And starting with that last one, these next like 4 or so, these are all just like basically at the same tier of amazingness. Like, I loved all of these. And number 4 on the list is A Sky Painted Gold by Laura Wood. This was such a beautiful surprise, and I've seen a lot of things that compare this book to The Great Gatsby, and actually there's even quotations from The Great Gatsby in this book, so that's definitely a heavy influence, and I can see that. It is set during the 20s. It's historical fiction that really it really talks about like classism, like class differences and wealth and privilege and those kinds of things. But what really this book reminds me of more than The Great Gatsby is I Captured the Castle by Dodie Smith. There's that feeling of like childhood and growing up, and the main character and like the sister relationships also kind of remind me of I Captured the Castle. This definitely isn't a retelling or anything like that, but that's the same kind of cozy vibe that I got from this book, but there's a bite to it. Like, this book handles things like racism and alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and there's even a suicide that is referenced in this book, so it's not afraid to show the darker sides of people's ordinary lives, and especially of problems of this time period. And oh, this was another one where the romantic relationship actually like gave me like heart palpitations almost. Like, I had like butterflies when they interacted, because there was always this part of me that like wasn't sure if things were gonna work out for them or like what was gonna happen, and I won't spoil you about that, but like this book was just so good. This is another one where I'm really incoherent about it, so maybe someday I'll actually put together a whole review where I can actually talk about what I loved about it. And I can see this becoming like a favorite comfort food type of reread for me, because it's just like my heart felt so like full and warm and cozy afterwards. But like I said, there was also a lot of deeper topics that this book handled as well, and I loved it. I have not heard a single person talk about this book, so I want to change that. Please, you guys, pick this up. Number 3 on the list is The Real Boy by Anne Ursu. And this is an absolutely gorgeous fantasy, and the main character, Oscar, is also an autistic character, which is not something I see a lot in fiction, so that was really wonderful. I will actually link the interview with the author where she talks about that down below. I really recommend you guys check that out. But this is just an absolutely beautiful story about this boy named Oscar, and in the world he lives in, magic is a commodity, but it's sort of fading. And he works for a magician, and he does kind of the grunt work that nobody wants to do, and nobody really treats him well. But then he and this girl who he befriends, they kind of have to team up and figure out why magic isn't working right anymore, and why these children are getting sick in this really wealthy town that's nearby them. And like, this is another one where I think it's good to not know too much about the story going in. Not like I've been giving you incredibly detailed synopses for the rest of these, but you know. I think that this book is just all about the characters and the quietness of the story and the atmosphere, but like, Oscar is one of my favorite protagonists of the year by far. He's just so wonderful and kind and smart, and he's grown up with people who don't treat him like he is these things. So when you see him start to realize that he is a good person and like he does have something to offer the world, it's just like so heartwarming and beautiful. But like, the book is never saccharine or sappy. It's just like, it feels so real, and I really loved how Anne Ursu wrote Oscar's point of view, because you really feel like you're kind of seeing the world through his eyes. Like, you understand his worldview and why he reacts to people the way he does. And I just think that was so well done. And the friendship between Oscar and Callie is just like beautiful, and it just means everything to me. And yeah, this is just such a fantastic book. I'm really excited to read everything that Anne Ursu writes in the future. And I think this would be a really great book for getting readers into fantasy. If fantasy is not really your thing, I would recommend a book like this, because it's much more about the characters and like a little bit about the magical atmosphere, but that's not the main point of the story. But all that being said, I do think the magic was handled really well also. And number 2 on my list is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is another booktube favorite, so I'm gonna try not to talk too much about it, because again, you probably know about it. It's a feminist retelling of the kind of the story of the Odyssey, but all about the character of Circe. And this was phenomenal. This is one of the only books I think I read this year that I think lived up to every single bit of the hype. Like, even though my expectations were astronomically high for this novel, I think they were all met. Circe is just such a fantastically complex character, and I really love that you feel her humanity, even though she's a titan, she's a goddess, so like, she's not a human, but you feel those like emotions that she's going through, but you also sense the differences between how she sees the world, like how she sees time passing and other people that she knows. You definitely feel the difference between how a human would view those things and how she does, because her circumstances are just so completely different. I do want to give a trigger warning for sexual assault in this book, but this is just such a fantastic novel. Madeline Miller's writing is incredible. I know lots of other people have said that, but this was the first thing I read from her, and it just blew me away with how quickly she constructs characters and worlds and events with just a few well-chosen sentences. Like, I feel like she's so good at choosing like the precise words that she needs. Her writing feels compact to me. Like, there's no wasted flowery language. Even though there's very beautiful passages, it's not overdone, and it's not for the sake of sounding pretty. And one of the reasons I know that this is a favorite is because I finished it and I was thinking about going back and rereading some of my favorite parts, and I was like, okay, well, I'd want to read that scene. Oh, that scene was really good. Oh, I love that character introduction. That was done really well. And by the time I had like finished thinking about my favorite parts I would reread, I was like, well, this is basically the whole novel. So yeah, Circe, fantastic, just as good as everyone says it is. I know I'm kind of feeding into the overhype problem, but I think this book is worth it. And finally, number 1 on my list is not going to surprise anyone who has seen like any of my videos, and that is Bloodwater Paint by Joy McCullough. I'm really sorry if you guys are sick of me talking about this book, but I do still feel like it's really underhyped here on BookTube or anywhere. I feel like not a lot of people have read this, and I think that's a shame, because this is a really gorgeous story about a real historical figure that really builds on her life and her experiences in a way that makes a really compelling story, but that also, like, I don't feel like Joy McCullough, I don't feel like she makes it too too fiction-like, if that makes sense. Like, from what I've read and learned about Artemisia Gentileschi, I feel like she really stayed true to the actual events and who she is, or who we think she was. And oh man, this is fantastic. Again, I have a full spoiler-free review for this book, and I don't really know what to say to like convince you guys to pick this up if you haven't already. Like, if I haven't already convinced you, I don't know what else I can do, because this is another book that deals with sexual assault, so I do want to give a trigger warning for that. But if you can read this book safely, I highly recommend it. I think that even this is one of those books where it almost doesn't matter what your preferred genre is or what your preferred style is. Like, if you don't normally pick up historical fiction, I think you would still really enjoy this. If you don't really care about the art world, I think you would still enjoy this. Like, there's just, it's such a brilliant character study, and there's so much strength that we see from Artemisia, and also the way that she really relates to her painting. That was another thing that I thought was fantastic. Like, I am not a visual arts kind of person, so for me to read this book and to feel very intimately how important painting is to her was really incredible and so well done. And another thing about this book that I think maybe puts some people off is that a majority of it is written in verse, but as soon as you get past those first couple chapters and you really settle into the style and you get used to it, I think it flows beautifully. And I think that it really was the best way to tell this story. Like, I can't imagine this book being different. I read this book in April, and it has stayed firmly at the top of my list of best books of the year, and I just can't say enough amazing things about it. Like, this book really, like, I think has changed me as a person. Okay, everybody, so those were my 12 favorite books of 2018, my kind of best of list. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these or what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. I hope you do. Obviously, I have very strong feelings about all of these. I think for many different reasons, they are all well deserving of their top spots on my list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!